Hi, good evening. Is it evening? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to ADG for the folks here in the studio with us, as well as everyone online. We're excited to have everyone here and excited to host this event this evening. I know Joel, you'll meet Joel Benj a little bit. For those that don't know him, he's going to dig in a little bit and talk a little bit about how we tell cyber stories, and we love doing it, and we really love learning about how to do it and how to do it better. So we're very excited to be part of this tonight, and welcome to ADG, and I'm going to turn it over to Tasha for a moment. Thank you.
Hello, those live and those online. I'm so glad that you could join us here today. This is part of our Cybersecurity Association of Maryland's business growing activities, part of our marketing subcommittee. So we couldn't do this event without the wonderful people here at ADG, so thank you so much. We're here to grow the cybersecurity industry through education, advocacy, and community building, and we could not think of a more perfect topic to really dive into tonight. So many of our companies and our members in our ecosystem struggle with telling these stories, so thank you for joining us to learn together and to share your experiences. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Joel.
Thanks very much, Tasha. So make sure that's on. So I am just a preamble. We have a fantastic panel tonight, but what I'm going to do is just share a little bit about ADG and our philosophy and how we help our clients. But over the next, I'm going to have to try to cut it short. I'm going to rush. I'm going to speak really fast over the next 15 and a half minutes. What I'm going to try to do is just share 3 principles that we've picked up over several decades. We've been in this business for about 30 years now. And many of us have been in your spaces working with your types of consumers. And then we came over to the dark side or the rainbow side, the bright side, to help you along with that. So if you don't know ADG, welcome. You're in our big, gigantic studio. We shoot a lot of our videos here. We're a strategic design and marketing firm. That's the next one. There we go. I'm going backwards. And we do branding, design, web, digital UI, UX, video, you name it. So what we do is we try to take a little bit different tact, where a lot of us are subject matter experts. And in doing so, we like to think that we do things a little bit differently. Who am I? Again, Joel, that's my Calvin Klein picture up there, as they say. I'm a strategist, and so what that is I sort of am the intermediary between the subject matter experts and the creative folks. I help our federal and our commercial customers sort of streamline their branding, their messaging, their cyber presentations. A little bit of my background, I started in the theater. Actually, I started as a Chuck E. Cheese. So birthday clown, then the theater, and I accidentally got a job in IT. Through that, I've worked in the video game industry. I've worked at NASA. I've worked for lots of big thinking organizations. But I really got my taste on this as the strategic cybersecurity communicator at the Department of Homeland Security. And then after that, I joined a startup, and that's the story that I want to tell tonight. I started with this startup. They were a cyber risk company. There we are doing our South by Southwest pitch. We went very, very deep into our product, and it was based on, and I'm going to have to read it because it's been several years, it was based on the founder's thesis in self-defending artificial intelligence and multinodal networks using the swarming patterns of eusocial insects. Ants. And the founder said, Joel, I don't know anybody who can explain this but you. And so we thought about it. And again, we went incredibly deeply. We started to put all the data out there. We started to try to teach our consumers, board members, why they should know how ants worked. And they didn't get it. It never connected. We never seemed to connect the dots with them. And what we realized was, even though these are some of the smartest people in their field, what we were trying to present to them was a little bit new. It was a little bit scary, and it was a little woo-woo. It was a little out there with the whole ant thing. And then a breakthrough happened. This is my son, Liam, on the left. He's about 3 years old, and he was just learning how to play chess. And he's a much better chess player than me. And through his love of games and through his love of trying to understand how systems worked. We used to build games and play games together. So when he was about 8 years old, he asked me, "Dad, how does your product work?" So I've been trying to explain this to PhDs and CEOs and board members and could not break through until I tried to explain this to then an 8-year-old. And I said, "Well, buddy, it kind of works like this." And I grabbed a deck of cards and we laid them out. And I tried to show him how the product worked. And I tried to ask him, well, if you had something, well, here, I'm just going to show you. What we ended up with, I have to move it over here, was a deck of cards. And so it's very simple. This is not anything different than you might do in your cybersecurity scenario building and your risk tabletops. We've got a desktop administrator. Maybe something happens with a buffer overflow that compromises their customer records and results in an availability impact. Now, we've seen this before, right? But putting it in someone's hands and giving them the ability to start playing around, an 8-year-old started to build scenarios that we'd never seen before and actually ask me, "Dad, how would you solve this? Dad, how would you solve this?" But the real breakthrough is when we started to look at our customers. We started to look at our customers and say, well, what do they care about? We weren't trying to sell to CISOs. We were trying to sell to risk officers. And we realized there was a piece missing. Operational risk, strategic risk, and I bumped my reputational risk. And immediately, as we started to show this to some of our potential customers, as they started to get these cards in their hands, they started to realize the potential of this. We were able to take what was a very complicated algorithm and explain it very simply in about 30 seconds. And it became very, very successful. In fact, we were asked to present at, I'm going to skip over these, present at the RSA conference. We presented this at the ISC Square Security Congress. And this deck is actually in use today at Carnegie Mellon University's Executive CISO program. Yes, the deck has outlived the company that it came from. It has something to do with the price point. These cards were about $10 a piece as opposed to $250,000 for the software license. So I'm going to just chalk that up. But I single-handedly was the leading sales engineer of my company with a deck of cards. The reason I bring this up is because it illustrates sort of the overarching theme that we want to talk about today, which is we need to think differently about how we communicate cybersecurity. We need to change something, right? We need to put ourselves in a different place. We need to try something new. And I hear what you're saying. You're saying, so Joel, how do we do it, right? This is why you're here. But I want to ask you a question first. I want to ask you to think about why you're in your business. What is it that you do? What is it that you bring to your customers? Because what you do is really important, right? You have the data, you have technology, you have expertise, you have insight to help your consumers, whether that's leadership, whether it's customers, whether it's public stakeholders. So why is it so hard to break through the noise? Why is it so hard to break through some of this commodity corporate competing policies that we have that are trying to capture the attention of your consumers? And I have a theory. This is the results of the 2019 SolarWinds Federal Cybersecurity Report. They interviewed a handful of federal IT decision makers and asked them, what are your largest obstacles? Number one, at 27% was budget constraints. Number two was complex internal environments. Number three and number four were competing priorities and lack of top-level direction and leadership. And I would say that I wish that I could give you a silver bullet to make your budgets bigger and to make your networks more simple. But if you take the bottom two and you combine them, right, I would say that this is a communication and engagement problem, right? If you can get your leadership to pay attention and to listen and to take your advice, and you could get them engaged, you would reduce, by the survey here, 27% of your problem. So what we're going to talk about really briefly is how we can get noticed, how we can get remembered, and how we can get results. Because ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Whether you're building a product, whether you're giving a threat brief, whether you're trying to engage a stakeholder, those are the things that you have to do as a communicator. And even though you don't think sometimes as yourself as a marketer or a salesperson or a communicator, you are, right? So let's rethink this. I have 3 simple principles. These are things that we do every day, whether we do it by habit or whether we just have to be thinking about this. And I want you to just sort of walk away with these, and I guarantee that you're going to change your perspective a little bit. Principle number 1 is your team, right? You need to focus on your audience's experience or let somebody else do it for you. So where are my comp sci majors? What am I building here? Does anybody recognize this? It's the OSI model, right? So this is just a metaphor, and I was a theater student, so sue me. But the thing about the OSI model is every single layer has a purpose. Every single player has a purpose, right? Sometimes in the OSI model, though, we talk about the user. We put the user on top. And the reason for that is because we don't want to forget where we're communicating to. We don't want to forget who we're presenting to. You have to build your team the exact same way. So just in the same way that you have the right backgrounds in your infrastructure techs, your data analytics, right? Your leadership who's doing this presentation needs to be coached and needs to be helped to think about the user experience, to think about the person that you're presenting to. And we would think that you should have a really awesome creative team as part of your communications team. Now, whether that's somebody who you have internally or whether you have an amazing resource like ADG Creative on hand, it doesn't matter, right? But the important thing is that they have those extra skills that are necessary to help your messaging break through. And that requires having unicorns. Right, so we talk a lot about unicorns. It's that really hard to find, combination of one thing or the other. It's not to say that they should be isolated. They should be cross-trained. They should understand your SMEs, right? So that's why we call them unicorns. You need to ensure that they've got the communication and design team has your technical subject matter in mind, your audience in mind, and then that special sauce. And it is possible to have that unicorn team. The next thing you need to think about is your context or your content. You need to understand what you can leave in and what you can take out. And I can think of absolutely no better example of this than The Matrix, right? The Matrix is one of my absolute favorite movies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a scene, but I'm going to ask you to recast the players. You're going to see Neo walk into the Nebuchadnezzar. You're going to see him talk to Cypher. I want you to imagine that Cypher is your NOC analyst. And Neo is the director.
Whoa! Neo.
Never sneak up on your NOC.
Always look at it coding? Well, you have to. Image translators work for the construct program. But there's way too much information if you code a matrix. You get used to it. I don't even see the code.
He says, I don't even see the code. How many times have we been in that situation where they're like, explain the problem to me, and you're like, look at all of this data. Look at all of these screens, right? Sometimes, even if you have a really smart person, it can be a trap to get too technical too quickly, right? When you're communicating the intricacies of cybersecurity. And even if you're talking to somebody who groks the subject, even if you're talking to someone who's on your level, it doesn't mean you always need to present there. You need to think about the purpose of your presentation, right? Is this an introduction? Is this a threat brief? Bottom line up front, just give it to me very quickly. I don't need everything, right? You can ask about what you can leave behind, maybe as a leave behind or an appendix. So here's a little bit of a thought experiment. If I were to walk you into our offices or walk you into a hotel ballroom and let you just hang around for about an hour and have you walk back out and ask you, how many chairs did you see? You probably didn't notice. However, if I asked you how many emergency exits were there, your subconscious brain has that tally. You can probably say, oh, there were probably 3 or 4 ways to get out of that building. And that's because we have this thing called the caveman brain, right? We still have this fight or flight. We still have this emotional, I need to only take in what I need. And so if you overtax your audience, if you give them too much information, they're going to start dropping packets, right? Because there's too much calorie burn. Your brain is actually built to start dropping things that's not that important. And the reason that you know where the exits are is because your brain has prioritized that information, right? So what you need to ask yourself is your information a chair or an exit? And the last, this is your delivery. I'm going to rip through this really quickly. I like to think about communications like malware. And if you think about malware, nobody says, here, please install this malware on your computer, right? We wrap it inside something that's alluring. We wrap it inside a trap. I like to think about our communications, our marketing that way. So you really need to know what your objective is. You really need to know what your payload is, but you also need to make it something that's alluring and something that's going to get someone to click. So enough commodity cybersecurity already, right? As much as I love the Matrix, it's been 20 years. They're going to make another one, right? But we're all tired of seeing the same thing. So don't be afraid of doing something different. Don't just try to fit in, right? It's important that you fit in to stand out, but if you don't stand out, then you're just going to look like another solution, another threat brief. If you put the same thing in front of your audience, they're going to start dropping packets. They're not going to pay attention anymore. So is video the best thing that you should do? Should you do a deck of cards as your executive training? Maybe do something different. I like to call this the whoa, right? Do something that's unexpected. One of the things that we did for a client a couple years ago, which is the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, they asked us to help them build a keynote presentation for their ChemBio conference. Do something that shakes them. Do something that gets them excited. And we said, well, why should we limit ourselves to a screen? So what we did was we actually put together a presentation that involved choreography, sound design, light projection, several screens, and halfway through the presentation, it leapt off the screen, and people were amazed. It was incredible. But if we had just done that, if we had just done something really cool's sake, people would have gone home and they would have said, yeah, we saw a really cool presentation, and what was it about? So the second part of this threefer is the why. Yes, it's important to do something very fantastic. Yes, it's important to get their attention, but you also have to do something that gives them a why. So we choreographed very carefully with that speaker. We made sure that all the visuals pointed back to him while he was doing that presentation. And there was a physical prop. It was a Post-it note, and it embodied the thesis of his talk, right? So we always drew back to the thesis. We always drew back to the why. And the last thing is the what's next. What we know from content marketing is sometimes you have to tell people what they need to do next. You have to give them that next step, right? So don't be afraid to, after your presentation, say, now you have a decision to make. Are you going to do X or are you going to do Y? A lot of really smart technical people think that if I just give the data, they're going to come to the same conclusion I am because it's very obvious to me. But sometimes you need to lead people along. So in summary, you need to pay attention to your team. I hope you go out, you find yourself some unicorns. From your content perspective, respect your caveman brain, right? We all know we're a little stressed. We all know that we drop packets sometimes. And again, think about your delivery. Think about your whoa, your why, and your what's next. All right? Thanks all very much.